Happy Wednesday! Thank you so much for joining me today on the Attachment Confessions. My name is Chelsea, and I am super excited that you're here today for episode 11, which, side note, 11 happens to be my favorite number, so you know I had to bring you a good one today. For those of you that are brand new to the Attachment Confessions, welcome to the pod. I'm so excited that you're here. From the moment I discovered attachment science, everything about every relationship I'd ever been in finally made sense. And now I'm figuring out what it takes to earn my attachment security and have the best possible relationships till death do I part. Here on the Attachment Confessions, we'll be diving into all things attachment science while you guys tag along on my attachment healing adventure. My hope is that by bringing attachment science to those of you who have never heard of it before, and by sharing my own story, you'll also be inspired to set out on your own attachment healing journey. Alrighty, we just wrapped up a 2-part series on narcissism, where we took a deep dive into the mind and motivations of a narcissist. And golly Wally, you guys. Hopefully, I was able to dispel any questions that you all had about narcissists and their relation to attachment science, which is none. Attachment and narcissism are 2 totally different psychological constructs. But if you missed the last 2 episodes, be sure to go check those out to get the scoop on all that drama. Today, I'm introducing you guys to a new series that we'll be doing sporadically throughout the Attachment Confessions. Guest lived experiences. Everybody that's tuned in knows all about my lived experience. You know, how my attachment formed in childhood, a bit about my romantic relationships, including some of my cringe attachment moments, how I learned about attachment theory, and how I'm actively in the process of learning the tools I need to heal my insecure, fearful, avoidant attachment so that I can experience healthy, secure relationships from here on out. But I figured it would be really cool to have other peeps join the pod from time to time to share their stories as well. My goal is to have guests from all walks of life and all ends of the attachment spectrum come on the Attachment Confessions to give some other perspectives. So, whether you're an anxious preoccupied, a dismissive avoidant, a fearful avoidant, or secure, #goals, we can all learn from each other here. So, I am super pumped to welcome my first lived experience guest to the pod, Brent. Hello, Brent. Thank you so much for being on the show today. How's it going?
It is going well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very excited to be here.
Good. Well, I'm excited to have you because, having some other perspective other than mine is super helpful, and especially a male's perspective and a different attachment styles perspective. I think that it's going to be great for everybody. So Thank you so much for agreeing to do this and get just like live roasted.
No problem.
Just
I'm looking forward
kidding.
to it. Looking forward to it.
All right, Brent. Well, why don't you start us off by talking a little bit about how you discovered attachment science? Because if you're anything like me, your mind must have been blown.
Yes. My mind is blown all the time the more I learn about the attachment science. To be honest with you, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know where to start. I'd never heard of it before. I remember seeing your podcast when it first came out, and I simply clicked on it just to show support and say, you know what, that's great. I'm glad she's doing that.
Okay. Facts.
But as I listened to it, I said, hold on, wait a second. There's something I need to pay attention to here. In my journey, just try to learn more about myself. And so I started to dive into it the more that I listened to the podcast and learned about myself and some of the things that might have impacted me in childhood till now.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much for even caring to show little old me some support by listening to my podcast. But it also really does make me so happy to hear that although you were tuning in just to be supportive, it actually intrigued you and made you think.
Definitely.
And you were able to relate to what I was saying and it resonated with you. So that just makes me so happy to hear.
Yeah.
So, okay, when you started learning about attachment science, what intrigued you the most?
I think what intrigued me the most initially, as you described the different styles, is I know that I have things that I want to improve on as far as my relationship. And so as I'm listening to it, I'm really just trying to figure out where I fit in this puzzle. Like, where do I fit in this puzzle? What can I learn about where I fit? But I think what really did it for me was when I started to dig more into my childhood and my upbringing. And that's when I started to really unpack how those things had impacted me.
Yeah. Okay. So when you first heard about it, you were just like, "Oh, this is interesting. I can relate this to my relationship."
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then it started connecting dots
Yes.
fairly quickly once it got into how attachment is formed when you look at your childhood.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. I struggled initially to figure out where my place was. Was I an FA? Was I a DA? I kind of fit into both categories, but the more that we talked about it and dove into it, we were able to come up with me being a DA and that being where I fit in the spectrum, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of things once I learned about how my childhood could have impacted me and my upbringing could have impacted me, that was the eye-opening piece for me.
Yeah.
And so I've learned a ton about myself over these last 9 or 10 episodes.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
know. Isn't that crazy?
it is. Yeah.
It is so wild. I was the exact same way whenever I very first heard about it. It was like a whole new dimension in my brain had been like
Yeah.
opened up to something that helped me understand myself better and all of my relationships
Mm-hmm.
better. So, yeah,
Can
that's
I ask you
awesome.
something though?
Yeah, okay. The tables have turned,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen.
So what led you to seeking this as a way to heal and improve as a person? Like, what made you go down the journey of
Yeah.
finding this resource?
So I actually didn't seek it.
Okay.
I was scrolling on Facebook because I'm 104 years old and I look at Facebook. And I had a good friend at the time who was in an abusive relationship and dealing with a lot there.
Okay.
And I just stumbled upon this video and I'm again 104 and so normally I don't even watch videos, like they annoy me. I'd rather just like see a picture than have to like listen to a video. But for some reason when I scrolled past and then it was like, "Oh, what is this lady have to say?" She was like, probably because she was really pretty, so I'm like, I'll listen to what she has to say.
Yes.
And it was Dr. Sarah Hensley, and she is the attachment expert that I've learned so much from. There's, a couple others that I reference on the podcast, Thais Gibson, and some others, but she is the one who I discovered all of this from. And it was basically a video of her talking about her dynamic with relationships and being in a narcissistic, abusive relationship for several years. That was her ex-husband. And so she was talking about that dynamic. And I was just like, whoa, I need to send this to my friend because everything that she's describing is like describing my friend's situation
Yeah.
perfectly.
Yeah.
And then my algorithm was like, oh, you like this Dr. Sarah Hensley lady because you actually watched one video in your life. So here's more from her. So I just kept like listening to her little videos that she would put out on this thing called attachment science that I'd never heard of before. I'd heard of attachment in terms of like, oh, there's anxious or there is avoidant.
Right.
And it never resonated with me because I was like, neither of those really speak to me of what I feel like I am, because I don't see myself as an anxious person and I don't see myself as like an avoidant person either. So I just never thought more of it after that. And that was several years ago from a counselor. So as I continued to watch more of her videos, instead of it being, oh, this is something I should share with my friend, I was like, oh, this is something I actually need, because she started talking in her videos about the dismissive avoidant attachment style. And at the time, the relationship that I was in, I figured out after doing this deep dive that I was with a dismissive avoidant. And I, being a fearful avoidant, our dynamic just, it would never work. We literally, the things that trigger each of our attachment wounds is like what both of our natural tendencies are. You don't know what you don't know, right? And a lot of attachment is very subconscious. It's on the subconscious level. But I was like, oh my gosh, this explains everything. I finally understand him now. And now I can see how I can better approach conversations or my needs that I'm scared to share and things like that. And so what initially started out as me just sharing something that I came across with a friend for the situation she was going through, the more that Facebook fed me the algorithms of Dr. Sarah Hensley, I realized, like, holy crap, this explains everything and is helping me in my own relationship. And ultimately, we didn't work out, but that's because our attachment styles, like, we are the most, a fearful avoidant and a dismissive avoidant is the most painful relationship dynamic. So it was a little too late for us by the time I learned all about this to repair it, unfortunately. But yeah, so that's how
amazing.
That's how I
So you stumbled upon it like I did then, basically. You weren't looking for it either.
Exactly.
It just happened. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you mind sharing with us a little bit about your childhood?
So my childhood was, if I could describe it, I would say interesting, to say the least. I was the youngest of 5 children, and that included me being a twin on top of that. So I had a built-in best friend, which was amazing.
Yes.
But we, you would look at the dynamic of my family with my father being in the music ministry and us being a very Christian-based and God-fearing family. Like, you would look at it from the outside and say, that's a family that I would love to be a part of.
Yeah, solid family.
Solid
vibes.
family, yeah, solid family. We all did the church thing together and would eat dinner together and do those things. But the more I started to learn about the attachment styles, the more I started to think, we didn't really push the envelope in my family, though. There wasn't a lot of talk about feelings. There wasn't a lot of deep discussion of any kind. It was more of a loving, affectionate, and surface conversation family. Just the things that were safe,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was your parents' relationship dynamic like?
So my parents have been married for almost 60 years.
60?
Almost 60.
Dang.
Yeah. One of the things I will say is I always saw them loving each other with words or affection, kindness, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw my parents have one disagreement or fight that I can remember.
Wow.
So if that would have happened, it would have been very foreign to me on how to react as a kid watching it. But so they loved each other dearly and still do to this day. My mom was always around. I would say that I spent a majority of my time with my mom. I'm a huge mama's boy. I'm the first to admit that. And my dad, he traveled and tried his best to support our family. And sometimes that would mean that he would travel for weeks at a time. Sometimes that means that he would be there for a little bit longer with us, but his job and his ministry called him to not always be present for us. So that was something that was difficult growing up and not having that fatherly influence sometimes.
Yeah.
But my mom was a huge supporter. She always tried to make something out of nothing. Like, so I can't tell you about some of the meals we used to have, and I'd be like, oh wow, she just put that together. But she was special to me, and she was a great human being. Just someone I would actually, I'll say this, I feel like the person in my life that I chose to have a relationship with reminds me a lot of my mom.
Okay.
And so I think that was one of the traits that made me say, ooh, that looks familiar. I think that there was something about her that made me think that she had a lot of those same qualities that my mother had.
The positive qualities.
The positive qualities, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me about, in terms of your parents, could you go to them with a problem, like an emotional problem, not like a math problem?
Yeah.
But I'm upset about this. I'm frustrated. My feelings were hurt. Anything like that?
You know, we didn't really have those types of conversations. And I don't know, Chelsea, if it means it's something that I couldn't go to them with. It just wasn't something that we did.
Okay.
So if I would have gone to them, I don't know what the response would have been. I can tell you what my mom's response would have been. She would have probably read me a verse and said, pray about it, or whatever the feedback would have been. But it just wasn't something that we really did. So expressing my feelings and talking about things I was struggling with, for me, it typically came out in anger, because I didn't do a lot of that.
You know how to like actually verbalize.
Yeah, I didn't know how to
emotions.
verbalize that.
Came out in other ways.
Yeah, it would come out in other forms.
Okay.
And so I didn't verbalize that, or know how to even verbalize feelings I had. And as a teenager, when you're going through all that you're going through and trying to figure your body out and trying to figure your mind out, and I didn't have those outlets where I could talk about a lot of those things growing up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I know that you mentioned like it just wasn't really something that we did. So it just sounds like things were kind of maybe brushed under the rug from an emotional standpoint, or a feelings standpoint, or you'll be fine, we'll pray about it, here's a Bible verse, and let's kind of move on like it nothing happened kind of a thing.
Yes,
okay.
That's fair to say. I mean, I feel like there was a lot of instances looking back where we could have had discussions. I remember being in elementary school, and this is before anxiety was the big thing that everybody talked about. And but I would have days where I was so anxious on the school bus that I would be sick on the school bus every single day. Or I would have to go home from school every single day because I would get sick at school. So I was feeling a lot of anxiety, a lot of anxiousness, and it was constant. But I don't remember having a single conversation with my parents about those feelings I was having. It was, hey, we're just going to come and pick you up from school and you can do the rest of your work here. And so I remember struggling in elementary school with those types of feelings, and it was just never something that we addressed or tried to get help for or anything like that.
Okay. Man, that breaks my heart. You hear that? And I know that you mentioned that you are the youngest of 5.
Yes, youngest of 5.
Tell me a little bit more about that dynamic.
So I have an older brother, 10 years older than me, that was just fabulous. I mean, the times that, my dad was on the road and doing things to support our family, my older brother was the one that typically stepped up and spent time with me and my twin brother. Like what 16 or 17-year-old teenager wants to take their 6 and 7-year-old brothers with them to their friend's house to watch a boxing fight or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
But he would do those sorts of things. He included us in everything. We would be playing flag football with grown men and we were 9 years old, right? And so he always included us. He tells me all the time that we're the brothers he always prayed for. And I truly believe that. Um, with my sisters are also older. I want to say 8 and 6 year difference. My sisters, we weren't as close with. Again, not anything that anyone did. It just wasn't the closest relationship. So we would have conversations with them. We would try to steal their food and do things like that. But I think they just mainly at that age kind of saw us as the annoying little brothers and wanted us out of their room. And I think that's normal. But I didn't have the greatest connection with my sisters growing up. It was more of a connection with my brother that stood out for me as a young child. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you recall experiencing any particularly traumatic events in your childhood?
I don't remember traumatic events necessarily or anything that stands out that I experienced in childhood. I do remember being in a new place where a lot of the folks around us had a good life. Like they were making good lives for each other and they had a lot of material things. And I remember being in this new situation where we didn't have those things. And that made things really, really tough growing up.
Okay. So when you say a new situation, what do you mean by
that? So we were, my family originally was in Detroit, Michigan. Okay. And we ended up later going to Oklahoma where we ended up all growing up and going to school and doing those things. But
how old were you when that move took place?
I can't say that because my wife makes fun of me all the time. I was a small infant at the time. Okay. That move took place.
You could really
before I knew
it happening.
Yes, before I knew anything that was going on. Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
However, I don't want to say that there was one event or trauma that I can remember, but I do remember those feelings of why do I not have these things? Like, why do I not?
Is it kind of shameful?
It was very shameful, very embarrassing, very shameful. And it was hard because I knew that my parents were trying to do their best and put things together. It just was very difficult getting up and walking into the school and seeing what I had on next to the person next to me, or not having we didn't have vehicles much growing up either, right? So there was so many things that just we take for granted today that the ordinary family has. And we didn't have a lot of those things growing up. We had love in our home. We had good times in our home. But that was traumatic for me, not having the things that I needed, to feel comfortable, and it could be something small,
or to
Chelsea.
Fit in,
like, yeah.
Right? Just feeling like you're fitting into a new place.
Yeah.
These people that seem to have it all.
Yes.
Kids just want to feel like they belong, right?
Yeah. So that was pretty challenging for me growing up. Yeah.
Yeah. You had mentioned your mom, being kind of like the one that you emulated your relationships after later on in life, or at least the person that you married. She had those great qualities that you admired in your mom, and that's what drew you to her, or part of what drew you to her. What about your dad?
Yeah, so me and my dad, and I would say as I've gotten older, our relationship has gotten better. But, there was times where it was really difficult forming a bond or connection with my dad because he traveled and, did the things that he did to support our family. And as a child, you don't think of those things. You just want your dad to be there, right?
Yeah.
But as a husband and a father that supports a family, obviously it made more sense for me. Oh, he was trying to do what I do and support a family. But it definitely made that relationship a little strained for me growing up, because he was not only the provider for the entire home, but he was also the disciplinary person for our home. And so, there was times where I would go a couple weeks without seeing them, and it's like, oh, you need to be in trouble for the thing you did 2 weeks ago that your mom told me about. And so it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the greatest when you would come home and that would be the first thing that you would deal with is some discipline from something you did a week ago.
Right. Yeah.
But it was a very strained relationship. There was just times that you needed that father figure, you didn't have it, or there was times that you just wanted to talk to him and you couldn't talk to him because he was on the road doing what he does.
Mm-hmm.
But it was difficult. I feel like later in my high school years when he had settled in and decided he was going to be at home more, at that point I had so many walls up that I still struggled to connect. He was there, but I had walls all over the place trying to protect myself. And
Yeah.
so I didn't really let him in like I probably should have at that time to be a more supportive father for me. But yeah, that would be the story of my relationship with my dad growing up.
Let me ask you this, because I know that we talked about you were on the fence of being a fearful avoidant or being a dismissive avoidant. And we came to the conclusion that you're a dismissive avoidant. And now I'm wondering if you're a fearful avoidant that leans dismissive. Do you associate, because of the walking on eggshells around your dad, associating love and pain in the same human being?
I never was fearful of my dad. I knew if I had done something wrong while he was gone, he was going to deal with it when he came home. And I hated that he had to be the person to do it. Like sometimes I would just be like, why couldn't my mom just handle it this one time? And I just not have to deal with my dad in that way when he came home.
Mm-hmm.
But I never felt like I was walking on eggshells. I never felt in fear of anything in my home. Like I was very comfortable in that space. I just don't think we ever had conversations that you should be having as a family about, mental health, stresses, anxiety, things you're dealing with in school, things you're dealing with in relationships. Like we just didn't do a ton of that. So I'm sure they had a ton of experience I could have picked from, listened to their feedback and learned a ton from them, but it just wasn't something that was ever offered or brought up. So who knows what I could have really gained from those types of conversations.
Yeah. Well, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And our parents are our first model of
Yes.
love
Yes.
and of what a family is supposed to be. You ask a 3-year-old, what's a family? They're going to be like, I have a mommy, I have a daddy, and I'm the baby, and they love me and they take care of me. You know what I mean? And so it's like, that is why that formed attachment that early on in childhood is so impactful, because it is the first thing that we associate love and intimacy and emotional attunement with, is the relationship that we have with our parents.
Yeah.
And so that's why it then goes on to shape how we behave and respond in relationships for the rest of our lives, because that is what is modeled to us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay. Well, thank you for taking us on a trip down memory lane of your childhood.
Yes.
I think this is a good place for us to take a pause. That was a lot of good info for us to all marinate on. So we'll pick up where we left off on the next episode. In the meantime, I wanted to give you guys the scoop on how my guest lecture at Oral Roberts University in Tulsa went. At the end of episode 9, I shared with you guys that I was super pumped, honored, and flabbergasted that a social work professor at ORU asked if I would be a guest speaker for one of his social work classes. Well, that happened this past Friday, and you guys, it went better than I ever could have imagined. By the grace of God, truly, all props go to him. I'm not gonna lie, it's one thing to tell my story on this podcast in the comfort and privacy of my own living room with only my cat to judge me. It's another thing to have to share my story in front of a live audience with many human eyeballs staring back at me. The imposter syndrome I was feeling beforehand was real, y'all. Like, what if I totally blank when it's time to talk? I can't edit anything. There's no redos. I was a tad bit nervous, to say the least. But when I say it went better than I could have ever imagined, I really mean it. The Lord gave me everything I needed and then some in that moment. The students were so awesome. They were locked in and asking some really good questions. I even had a few come up at the end and chat with me. They shared some really touching things with me, and that meant a lot and made me so glad that I didn't run from my fears and just say, thanks, but no thanks to the opportunity. Shout out to Professor Mike and everyone in that class for being super awesome and engaging, and a special shout out to Camille and Kia for the chat afterwards. I guess this means that I'm now available for speaking gigs, so DM me on my Instagram at The Attachment Confessions if that's something that you're interested in collaborating on. Next week, we'll have part 2 of our convo with Brent, diving into how his formed dismissive avoidant attachment style in childhood went on to shape his behavior and influence his romantic relationships in adulthood. So be sure to tune into that. In the meantime, if you could please follow or subscribe, rate, and review The Attachment Confessions so that this podcast can continue to reach people that need to hear about attachment theory, I would be so, so grateful. I hope everyone has a wonderful week, and I'll see you right here next Wednesday on The Attachment Confessions. Love you guys. Bye.